All right, everybody, welcome to today's edition of the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo Rice, and my correspondent,
Simone Cherie.
All right, so today we have a very interesting show. This is a week filled of information, different types of guests. It's just your COVID-19 Get Informed week. So we're going to be looking at different communities, different clusters of people, just to see what all is going on in your immediate circle, in your immediate world. So on today, we have a very special guest and first-time guest, Mr. Santiago Marquez. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I hope everybody's safe out there.
Yes, fortunately.
All right. So he is the president and CEO of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And most of you know that we had Chris Clark, who is the president and CEO of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. I think either last year or the year before last. It was one of the two. So we kind of got a foundational ideology of what a Chamber of Commerce is designed to do. I personally have never heard of a Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and I was highly curious to find out exactly what it is, what it does. But we're going to start with your background. So tell us more about you, who you are, all that good stuff, Mr. Santiago.
Sure. Yeah, I was born in Cuba, left when I was a year old. So that was back in 71. Lived in Oregon throughout the 70s and then came to Georgia when I was 12 in the 80s with my mother, got a job at Georgia Pacific as they moved their headquarters here. And I spent my formative years here, started in the nonprofit sector back in 98 and have been in the nonprofit sector ever since. Really found a passion, a home, and really love the idea of mixing business and nonprofit work. Business and social services, I think, is the ideal spot for me. Anyway.
Okay, so like I said, we've had a discussion about what a Chamber of Commerce is. So explain the ideology behind starting a Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.
Right. Well, so the Hispanic Chamber has been around 36 years. I've been at the Chamber 12, okay. So it was pretty strong by the time I got there. And it was started back, I think it was 84, by a group of Hispanic leaders that realized that they needed to have a chamber to try to help them grow their businesses, right? And so one of the fortunate things I think about Atlanta is that there are a lot of corporations that are headquartered here. So the chamber has enjoyed a lot of corporate support. That's not the case across the country, but really the idea behind a Hispanic chamber is to try to provide the resources needed for Hispanic businesses to connect with existing resources so that they can scale. Hispanic businesses are about 3 times smaller than general market small businesses. So there's a lot of catch up to do. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of connectivity to the established organizations that can help them grow, such as chambers of commerce. So that's why I believe that we have been so strong throughout the years.
So in your current state, what are some of the objectives you guys are trying to execute in this year, especially with all the COVID stuff going on? What are some of the things you guys are trying to execute? What is on your list?
Yeah, so we had to pivot, right? We had to pivot, when the crisis started, and I'm proud of our team. Our team pivoted really quickly, and there's 2 main areas of focus I can tell you for this year for us. One is making sure that we're doing everything we can to help small businesses survive this crisis. So I'm proud to announce today, we haven't even announced it yet. We're about to do a press release. Oh. We just got awarded, breaking news here, through the United Way and the Community Foundation of Atlanta. We received a $100,000 grant to provide grants to small businesses that did not qualify for PPP or for EIDL, the disaster loan program. And of course, there's a criteria that we're setting for these businesses to be able to qualify for these grants. But the idea is to try to help them survive this crisis so that we can get them back reopened. And then part 2 is we're launching a program here with the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. So there is a U.S. Hispanic Chamber and Wells Fargo, and this program is called Avanzar, which means moving forward. And that's going to be a business accelerator with about 10 to 15 businesses that we will put into an 8-month program to try to help them grow their business through the crisis, which seems anticlimactic, but we want to help them survive and then get them back into growth mode again. Resiliency is really the theme that's underlying all of this.
Okay, Simone, you had an outlook before we started, so I'll let you step in.
Yeah. So we've just been kind of giving updates about where COVID-19 is on a daily basis in Georgia. So as of today, this is as of 9:25 this morning, and the Department of Public Health has been really good about updating this website. There's 33,833 confirmed cases. The death toll, is at 1,405. So the curve flattening, if you look at what the Department of Public Health puts out, there's kind of a 7-day moving average, and they're going from the time symptoms are reported to the time that the person is ultimately tested or hospitalized, and that number, that curve continues to go down. It's still kind of difficult to tell whether or not the virus is spreading, but it does seem that based on the data that they're putting out, that the rate at which people are testing positive is decreasing. They've also kind of started to release more information about who's being affected by COVID, because over the past couple of weeks, there's been a lot of news reporting about different communities of color, the African American community and the Latino community being overly impacted by COVID-19 versus other communities. And so Georgia's starting to put those numbers out. However, you'll notice that they don't have enough data to be as accurate as we would like. Based on the information that we have, about 25% of folks, either their racial or ethnic background was missing from their confirmed tests, or it's just unknown and just wasn't reported on. So it's kind of hard to see that disparity here. For African Americans, it may be a little bit more clear, but another thing that came to my mind, Mr. Marquez, as you were talking, was how different businesses have been impacted by this. And we know that there's been COVID relief to a certain extent, and there's been a lot of frustrations in some respects about different types of businesses. And we've had lots of conversations on this show about what makes a small business, and whether or not some businesses that are receiving a bulk of this relief are indeed small. There's an article that came out this morning from GPB, news about different Latino businesses and their access to capital and access to loans, whether PPP loans or otherwise. So I was really glad to hear that you had to say something about that for Georgia, and maybe Georgia's above the curve compared to like Arizona and Texas and other places where this seems to be a real barrier.
Okay. Yes. Wow. You said a lot there. You're
Sorry.
You're good.
Yeah, I know.
Where do I start? What would you like? How can I comment on this?
So maybe with businesses first, like just for Latino small businesses. And I don't know if you could talk about Georgia compared to other states, if you've got enough information there, but it'd be really good to know if some of the headlines that we see coming out of the national publications about difficulty getting access to capital, difficulty getting PPP loans, language barriers, et cetera, for Latino businesses. It'd be really good to understand if Georgia's a place where Latino communities are also running into that and small businesses.
Absolutely. So, I heard a famous entrepreneur yesterday was on Meet the Press, and he said that this isn't, a pandemic, but on top of this pandemic, underlying this pandemic, there are epidemics. One of the epidemics that the business community has is lack of access to capital. And this has been something that we have been working on at the Chamber. We started working on this 4 or 5 years ago through our 501c3. And we realized at that point that we needed to change the nature of the business of the C3 from being a business incubator to a business accelerator that actually provided access to capital and education. So we know that Hispanic businesses lack information and education. When I say that, it doesn't necessarily mean academic education, though that is a problem in our community. We're tackling that too. It's more about having a sound, solid business plan, right? And I'm speaking in generalities here. So we got to start with the fact of having the knowledge to create a sound business plan. And by having a sound business plan, that business plan will help you be able to be banked. So a lot of our businesses are not banked, right? And they don't really have a relationship with a lender, with a bank, right? And there aren't any community banks that are Hispanic owned right now or Hispanic centric in Georgia. There are a couple of CDFIs, community development financial institutions, which are nonprofits that lend to those small businesses that banks won't lend to. And there's a couple in Georgia, one in particular, ACE, that we work very closely with because they have a serious focus on Hispanic businesses. So you can imagine before this started, there was a lack of our businesses being banked and having business plans, which means that when the PPP came, the new, the information was go to your banks, call your banks and have them help you so that you can get the PPP. So that was already a big issue. Then we realized that for small businesses, the better bet was community banks or smaller, banks, or even these community development financial institutions were better ways for them to get banked. Now, the good news is this: during the second round of PPP funding, I will say that up to last Friday, union that was taking applications for the PPP. And I think it's First Choice Credit Union, which Cassius Butts is the CEO now. Cassius used to be this business administrator here. And so Cassius knows small businesses really well. He knows minority businesses really well. So this was as of Friday. So that means that, there's still money out there for these small businesses, in particular minority businesses, right? Which is good news. And we did start to see minority businesses getting the PPP, at least our businesses getting the PPP over the second round of funding, the first.
That's good. That's really good news.
So I guess my question is, is the timing okay? Because there's been about a month or two gap between the first round and the second round. Was that money in time enough to save a lot of you guys' your community's business?
Okay, I think you're back now.
I can hear you now.
Yeah, you froze up on me there. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Oh, no problem.
If you could repeat the question, I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries. No, I was saying there's been about a couple of weeks to a month between the first round of funding versus the second round. Was the second round of funding in time enough to save enough of you guys' businesses in your community, or did you guys have to find alternate routes to keep these businesses afloat?
Yeah, so look, I think unfortunately, as soon as this crisis hit, we started getting phone calls from some businesses that closed right away, right? A couple of restaurants that were getting information about unemployment, wanted to know what they needed to do. They felt terrible, but they were basically closing their doors and letting all of their employees go, right? And certainly we saw in certain sectors, like food and beverage, any sector that is related to hospitality, the businesses that had a good cash position, and most small businesses only have about 2 weeks of cash on hand. The ones that had a good cash position were able to kind of weather the storm a little bit, right? And just today, and this is more good news. I like to share good news. I mean, I share it all. We heard of one of our businesses, which is a limousine company, Empress Elite Limousine Company, owned by a Latina, that they're back. They're up and running again. So that was one of the first companies that I called because I knew they were being nailed pretty hard. But no, every day counts, right? And so every day that you don't have operating cash, and when you're a small business and you're going day to day, forget week to week or paycheck to paycheck, but you're counting on opening your business every day because you're in the retail sector, the food and beverage sector. Every day you're closed. Some businesses will not recover from this, right? But I will say this, because I like to be fair, and I had to learn this the hard way because I'm not a patient person. The government moved extremely fast for being the government. And, we had a lot of politicians on our show, and for them, they said, this is a phenomenal pace for the government to be able to move and get this money out. And if you really think about it, the SBA did move very quickly in getting this money out to businesses. They had a lot of hiccups along the way, but they're not used to doing this. But for a business owner who's needing to open their doors every day, some businesses won't recover from this at all, unfortunately.
For sure.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned that company, I wanted to bring up that I saw a really interesting statistic on the GHCC site, that 40 or 45% of the businesses in the chamber are owned by women, and that feels like a huge number.
It is.
So, and I know that it looks like part of the groups or maybe subgroups that you've got within the chamber are millennials or are women or are different. Can you talk kind of about the makeup of the Latino business community in Georgia? And, I guess the entrepreneurs, maybe they're solopreneurs, kind of what some of the demographics are. Are there a lot of individuals? Can you talk more just about the composition of those businesses?
Sure, and I think that's a great term you just used. Absolutely. So what we know is this: we know that the fastest growth of entrepreneurship in the United States has been led by women of color. In Georgia, Latinas have played a huge role in that. I believe we were number 6 in the United States in terms of Latina, owned businesses.
Very
And
cool.
we have experienced that in our own chamber. So we have a division that's called EME, which is M de Mujer, M for Mujer, which is woman. We have been doing a lot of breakfast meetings and seminars and workshops and a women's conference that we hold every year at Coca-Cola. The group has only been around a couple of years, right? But the idea here is to really create a mentoring program where we can bring Latinas who have established businesses to try to help and mentor, the Latinas who are now just starting businesses. But there's no doubt that the numbers, the energy, the amount of growth and the energy is definitely there with our Latina-owned businesses. Also with millennials, next gen, we have a division called HYPE, Hispanic Young Professionals and Entrepreneurs, which is led by, both groups are led by volunteers. And there, what we have noticed is that there's a real excitement. Even our next gen folks that are working in corporate, a lot of them would like to get to the place where they're
the phone is kind of went out on the end of that.
Yeah, sorry. So in essence, what we do is we have different brands under the chamber that attract different segments, right? So we have the Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, which, I would say attracts everybody. But then we realized that we needed a brand, and we needed, a whole programming development to try to attract Latina business owners. And we'll gather 90 Latina business owners. And in some cases, they'll want to speak in Spanish. And in other cases, the ones that are a little bit more corporate, more career focused, we'll have those programs in English. And the same thing with Next Gen. What we have realized is that it's much better for us to have programming that's designed by millennials, for millennials. And it's been amazing. I mean, we're so much stronger because of that segmentation, right? That all feeds into the chamber.
Sure. Can I ask, I don't know if you have another question, Ricardo, but this is one last thing I wanted to ask, but I don't mean to dominate the questions here, but who are some of the strongest partners for the chamber outside of the business community? Like, do you collaborate a lot with any of the business programs from like the schools, whether it's Tech's program or Emory's program, or do you have faith-based partnerships, or I'm trying to think about another segment here. I know you mentioned the nonprofit sector just with regard to alternative financing, but is there cross collaboration for the chamber that kind of helps with some of the programs or any of the other efforts that you're working on?
Yeah, I'm a very big believer in collaborations. That's part of my core philosophy, because there's I really believe there is a scarcity of resources, especially when it comes to nonprofits. At the end of the day, the chamber is a nonprofit. And so why reinvent something if it's working, right? So we have strong partnerships with general market chambers. There is not a stronger relationship or partnership that we have than the Georgia Chamber. You mentioned them. We're actually housed in their facility. We're like their Hispanic business arm, so we learn a lot from them. But by the same token, we also have partnerships with the Gwinnett Chamber, the North Fulton Chamber, the Cobb Chamber, the Douglas Chamber, and now the Henry Chamber. So we try to be a solution to those county chambers who may be struggling to get in Hispanic business owners, even though they want to and they're trying to. And so we provide that cultural competency and that language piece, as well as we believe very firmly that it's really important for Hispanic business owners, if they really are serious about growing the business, they need to join their local chambers. And that's a message that we send out all the time. Joining us is wonderful. We want you to be part of us. But if you're really serious about growing your business and you live in Cobb County or your business is in Cobb County, you need to join the Cobb Chamber or the Gwinnett Chamber, right? Because they are so plugged into the local governments and everything that's happening that you're doing yourself a disservice, in our belief, by not being part of them, right? So we have a great partnership with them. And then we partner with other Hispanic organizations that are not necessarily business organizations, but because we are a Hispanic chamber, and I think Ricardo said it best, as he was talking, we serve a community. So it's not just businesses, we serve the entire community. And I'll give you an example. We partnered with the Latin American Association to do food drives with the Atlanta Braves because we think it's critical. This is a humanitarian crisis. And if we can help try to organize how to get food into the mouths of hungry people, we're going to do it. And then we actually led a benefit concert about a month ago to serve those that are most needed and needy in our community. And those dollars went to the Latino Community Fund that went to other organizations. We didn't get a dime of that, but the idea was to try to help the most needy in our community, right? So we're always trying to do things like that because we're a leader in our community. So I see it as we serve the entire community.
That's a great way to put it. Go ahead, Ricardo.
So my question, I guess one of my questions is the language barrier one of the major hurdles that you find a lot with the businesses that are connected to you as it pertains to joining other chambers, intermingling with other types of businesses? Is that one of the major issues that you find with the people that are part of your organization?
So I definitely think language is part of it. So there's two ways to address the language situation. One is, language preferred, because we have a lot of members in our chamber that are bilingual, but they want to mingle and they want to interact in Spanish or Spanglish, really, and then there's a big segment, believe it or not, of entrepreneurs that are very successful that really don't speak much English here in Atlanta, and for them having information and meetings available in Spanish is a difference maker. But I think for the majority, what we're seeing is just a comfort level. It feels like culture when you're delivering some programming in Spanish. Now, when we're trying to attract the folks that are on a career track, in corporations, then that programming is done in English because that's what they told us they wanted, right? And the same thing with our next gen, with millennials. They have told us they prefer the programming in English. So, that's why it's so important for us to segment and learn and hear and say, okay, this is what you want. But yes, I think, but beyond that, there's also, in terms of, the businesses are not, for the most part, we did a study 3 or 4 years ago with other organizations with Stanford University on small Hispanic businesses, 455 of them. And what we learned is, there are a lot that are micro businesses, okay, in our community. And those micro businesses, for the most part, are not tied to any chamber, not even ours, right? They may not know what a chamber is. Like you said yourself, Ricardo, you learned about a chamber last year in terms of the mechanics of it, right? So they may not know what a chamber is, what a chamber does, and why they should join a chamber. And so there's a lot, and then there has to be the value proposition. What can you do for me? Why would I spend, $250 or $500 to be a member? How are you going to help me, right? And so for that segment, that's where we have these programs that are really nuts and bolts, trying to help these businesses understand how to develop a business plan and grow their business. I mean, we believe that to be critical,
Okay, so over the last, definitely last 2 years, me and Simone have had explicit and very long conversations about immigration reform and things of that magnitude. So I know that with you guys' community in specific, that immigration legislation is a big thing, is very vital and very important to your chamber. So can you speak a little bit about that? Like, what does it look like? I know before we got into COVID, it probably was a way bigger priority than it is now, but just can you speak on that or give us some more insight into that and how it affects you guys' community?
Oh, absolutely. One of the single most important things that could happen, for the Hispanic community would be comprehensive immigration reform. And, the idea that we need to figure out How do we, get the 11 or 12 million folks that are here that are working, that are undocumented? How can we get them into the system, get them out of the shadows, let them participate in society and do it fairly? And then also, but there's a lot of pieces to immigration too, right? What are the needs of America? How do we have a comprehensive immigration policy that needs to be updated? We've talked about this with many, many different politicians, some conservatives, some liberals, and even the Georgia Chamber and us have been addressing it. And before COVID, it became a workforce issue, right? Because I think if we can remember back in February, it was 3.5% unemployment. We were hearing from a lot of our own businesses, construction companies, retail, that they didn't have the workforce. They couldn't get the workforce to fulfill the labor. And so they were trying to figure out how do they fill their labor shortages, right? And then everything flipped all of a sudden, like almost overnight. So that's going to certainly be something that's going to come into play. But I can tell you that comprehensive immigration reform done properly, I think would help America. And it's something that we have been working on, not so much in the forefront, but, certainly been part of coalitions to try to get that to happen, and unfortunately we run across, political years, presidential election years and then elections, and it becomes tough to get it done. But it would definitely be a game changer for the community, and I think for the country too.
Sure. Some of the stuff that I do in the justice reform space, I think I've run into a couple of folks who may be a part of the chamber in one way or another. Jaime Rangel and
great guy.
Yeah, and Sam Aguilar at Forward US are awesome guys, and they brought to my attention a bill that I think was under consideration this session, but the session,
right,
kind of got turned on its head with regard to in-state tuition and how many undocumented students or just non-citizens who are living in Georgia and have gone to high school in Georgia and who Georgia is their home and can't qualify for in-state tuition. When you talk about a labor shortage, that's something that I think universally a lot of business leaders have been speaking to for a while, is that Georgian students are finding it, more cost effective or more advantageous to leave, and we're getting great talent that's imported from other states, and we don't seem to be able to keep our own students here and keep them educated here. So I know a little earlier you talked about education and its importance, but sometimes it's, especially on this show, we've also talked about how different education looks now and how some companies are focusing on specific skills or maybe even training for their immediate needs. And so how would you kind of describe the ideal picture of education and education equality, or what you think is going to help businesses the most? Do you think that it's a matter of steering students, Latino and otherwise, towards specializations in one or two skill sets, or do you think there still needs to be a really big push for a traditional 4-year degree or further, and that we need to be able to do that economically? What would you say?
So, I thank you for asking that question. I spent 5 years of my life working for Boys and Girls Clubs of America. Oh, yeah. And I traveled the United States, went into some pretty, rough neighborhoods. And when I say rough, I mean, east side of LA and west side of San Antonio and south side of Chicago. I mean, there's real gang activity going on there. And we did a lot of work with our Hispanic youth, and I learned a lot. And so what I know is this, before this crisis, before COVID-19, maybe one of the biggest crises facing the Hispanic community was the lack of graduation rates for our students, right? And we know there are a lot of barriers for them. We know that parents are working, multiple jobs, are working very hard. In some cases, the parents are not engaged with the school in many cases, right? And so they're relying on the students to be little adults. And those students, shouldn't be the ones who are involved in the middle. There should be a dialogue between the parents and the school, right? And we also know that our schools are, and for many cases, are overwhelmed, right? Especially our public schools. So the squeaky wheel tends to get the grease, and that's not a criticism. It is what it is, right? I mean, you're trying to get these kids through. So if you have parents that are in your ear and parents that are going to conferences and participating, then, I think those kids are going to get some attention. And so all of that is a big factor. And then you take into consideration the fact that maybe, nobody's talking to our young people about dreaming, about, what the future looks like. And my point about traveling to the toughest neighborhoods in the United States is that we would always find these great students, that were there, that were scoring high marks, despite all the situation that was going on, where they lived, and the fact that there were drive-bys every 2 weeks, and the fact that their home situation wasn't good, and they didn't have a place to study. They didn't have a room that they can go to and close the door and study, or the pressure that was being put on them to go to work at a certain age and not a focus on education. Despite all of that, we saw some kids that were really succeeding, and we had some programming to try to help elevate them, right? So I think that it's a very complicated question, and I think that we have to really focus on the individual students. You're going to have these students that are academics that need to be going to pristine universities, right? And then that despite all the conditions that they're in, they're excelling. They're incredibly brilliant. We need that in our community. We need that in our society. And then you're going to have some students that don't like school but are great with their hands, and they should be going into some technical fields where they can come out in 2 years and probably make 50, 60, 70 grand. And if they do it right, in a few years, they're going to be making over 6 figures, and they're going to have a career that they really like and enjoy. So I think it's really getting to know that student and trying to match them with opportunities. But there's more to it. It's including the family plays a big role in it, and that family with the school, getting connected, getting the family connected to the school. If you don't mind, I'll tell you a quick story. There was a principal in Gainesville Elementary many years ago. I think it was 2004. He's now moved on to other things, but he made national news because he extended the school day for the kids that were getting a C and below until like 5 o'clock. And he told the teachers when he got there, he said, now we're going to excel. This is the expectation. This is where we're going to get to. If you don't want to be part of it, you're going to have to find another job. Extended the school day until 5, I think it was either 5 or 6 o'clock, and went on Saturdays for the kids that had a C or below. But then what he would do is, he would feed these families, because he knew he had a lot of poverty with his school. Like on Thanksgiving, that week, he would make sure that he would get, turkeys and dinners, and he would feed the families, and he arranged transportation because he knew that was an issue for the kids. And he made sure that he had bilingual teachers that can speak to the parents. But that school started, nailing their scores and getting their scores up here. It took a couple of years. But unfortunately, I believe that's the kind of effort that we're going to have to undertake, right? Education has changed. The needs of our communities have changed, right? The school can't just be a school anymore, unfortunately. It becomes this whole community organization. And we have to help with that, all of us. So for me, RCR members of the chamber, they could be role models, and they should go and speak, give an hour of their time, and so what I tell our members is, if you spend 1 hour of your time, if you're that busy, I understand, go talk to young people, go in your tie and your suit or in your shirt, and go talk to young people for an hour. They probably haven't seen anybody like you, and they're going to ask you a bunch of questions. Tell them your story, because it's probably very similar to theirs.
So sticking with education, how important are programs that are like ESOL type programs that help individuals who speak foreign languages, not necessarily foreign languages, but have their own languages, incorporate themselves with English, stuff like that? How important are those kind of programs?
Critical, but I would say they're critical for both the kids and the adults, right? Because we definitely want the adults to be able to communicate in English also. And we are in the United States, and so English, is a language that is spoken here. So if we can help the families, and at Boys and Girls Clubs, we had some programs like that where we actually worked with families, which was something Boys and Girls Clubs had never done, teaching the parents English as a second language, because we wanted them to feel comfortable going into the schools and talking to the teachers. You can't expect.
Okay, so we were talking about. Oh, nothing. Okay.
Sorry.
So we were talking about work. Oh, no worries. We were talking about workforce.
Yes.
So before the epidemic or pandemic happened, you were saying that workforce was an issue for a lot of the businesses that are with you guys. So now that we're slowly opening back up Georgia, where do we stand with workforce issues?
We shall see, right? I think that is the big question. I know that, in some cases, those same companies were calling us when this started and asking a lot of questions about unemployment insurance, right? And how do they furlough employees, and if they have contract. It's very interesting, depends on the type of business, but in some cases, your workforce may be mostly contractors, right? Or subcontractors, or 1099s, or you may have a mix of employees and 1099. So we were getting a lot of questions, and we would bring on experts. We didn't try to answer those, but we would bring employment lawyers or Department of Labor to try to facilitate those questions. And in many cases, they didn't know because, everything was changing very quickly. So I think what's going to be interesting, to your point, is when this started, I heard a lot about a V, kind of like, okay, we're going to have like a V recession, or not even a recession. The economy is going to take a V shape. And a lot of people thought we'd shoot back up. And now I'm hearing more of like a U, or maybe a soft W. So I don't know yet. I mean, it'll be interesting to see who starts rehiring and getting back to work. We're certainly anxious to see.
Okay, so we're getting down to about the last 12 minutes. So let's get to some brass tacks that will be very interesting issues for the remainder of 2020. So I guess my question is, what is at the forefront for you guys now that we are opening Georgia? What is at the forefront issue-wise that you guys want to get back into immediately?
Well, health is number one. And if you are a business and you have employees and you have customers that you need to see face to face, and I say that because I know, in the gig economy with technology, there are some entrepreneurs and some folks that are making a living that very rarely have to interact in person with people, so I think for them, there's less stress. But for the rest of us who, have to open our offices eventually and have to interact with people, so we have to have a plan. And what we're trying to teach our businesses is you have to have a well-written plan here, right? You have to have a plan on how you're going to keep your employees safe, how you're going to keep your customers safe, how you're going to keep your work area clean and disinfected. And so that's critical. And if you don't think you're in the health and wellness business, you're not really up to date, because you are. All of a sudden now, if you're a business owner, you better really think about health and wellness as number one. And then, number two is, we're not going to be able, this is not flipping the light switch. This is like a sunrise, right? And every little moment gets brighter and brighter, in my opinion. And I wish I'd originated that. I didn't. I give Senator Butch Miller the credit for that. He was on our show last week, and I love that analogy. We're not going to go back to flipping the light switch, so we're going to have to creep and crawl our way. And I think that means, how do you do business and how do you try to get revenue coming back in, understanding that you're not going to be able to go right back to the way you were doing business before. And in some cases, you may not want to, right? So there's two things working there. One is, as a chamber, how do we gather people without gathering people in person? And obviously that's through Zoom and webinars and seminars. And then number two is, how do we learn lessons from this and make our operating model more efficient? And for us, that's working remotely, right? We don't have to have everybody in the office every day. We've been incredibly efficient during this crisis. Now, we can't stay in crisis mode. We have to flip the switch and get back to some kind of sense of normalcy. And as we're learning that, we're teaching our businesses to be innovative and to think and take lessons learned from the pandemic, implement them into their plan, but make sure that they have a well-written, well thought out plan of how they're going to operate if they're planning on seeing people and bringing their employees back to the offices. Because it's not just saying, okay, come on back, people. You have to really think this through.
As it pertains to technology, because we've talked about some barriers that a lot of your businesses probably encounter, where do they stand a lot with technology, being able to understand how to operate Zoom? Because I'm gonna tell you, if it was not for Simone, a lot of this Zoom stuff that happens would not happen. Because even with me being, a tech person but not a techie, right. It's a little trying. So where does a lot of your business stand with dealing with technology as it pertains to what we're dealing with currently?
So I think that, look, if you and we had the same experience, by the way. We had one young lady that worked with us. Thank goodness she had an IT background and she got it very quickly, and she got us on Zoom and Facebook Live. If it wouldn't have been for her, I don't think we would have been able to do what we did. I think that if you didn't exist and you got away with it, if you didn't exist online, if you didn't have a social media presence, if you weren't using video before, and you managed to do well because the economy was going well, those days are probably over. If I were a business owner, and I would invest in running the chamber. We're investing in marketing, and we're investing in video, and we're investing in PR, and even the interns, right? We just got an intern who's a marketing major from Emory. She's a junior. So we're really trying to put a lot of focus into that to make sure that that area of our business is beefed up, because we know that's how we're going to stay in front of people. That's how we're going to give information to people. That's how we're going to sell in many cases, right? And that's how we become relevant, stay relevant, because in my opinion, out of sight, out of mind. So I do have examples of businesses that have not done anything in terms of trying to stay in front of people, during this crisis. They've hibernated. I think that's a terrible strategy. I just don't know how they're going to be able to bounce back from that, in my opinion. So I think that for those that haven't invested, it's scary because they don't know. I agree with you. Technology is a very scary thing. So my recommendation is, find if you're not a member of a chamber, there are plenty of companies that are marketing firms that can help you with social media, videos, and that's expensive. It's not cheap, and not everybody specializes in the same thing. But really get to know and understand what you need. That's critical. And then understand who can help you with that. Because if you don't exist online right now, and if you don't have a presence, you're not going to do well, in my opinion.
Absolutely agree. Simone, anything that you want to?
I do. It's not political, but because it is an election year, and a very big election year, and especially a big year in Georgia, and this doesn't have to be the chamber if it's something that you just want to speak to personally, but can you talk about kind of what the significance of civic engagement has been in your experience, whether it's right now running the chamber, or maybe even previously, being a part of a huge national mentorship organization? I feel like, I don't know if it has to start when you're a child, because when I was a child, I was not necessarily civically engaged or active, but there's so many people who are on a slate that play a role in our everyday lives. And it could be the lieutenant governor, it could be the secretary of state, it could be a judge, it could be the superintendent of schools, but there's just so many elected offices in Georgia that I feel like don't get our attention enough as it is. And that, given this is kind of a weird year, and there are folks who are confused about how to vote or whether or not they will vote, in your experience and in your background, like, how important is civic engagement and casting the ballot, and maybe even in Georgia, if you can think in particular, why would you say that may be important this year than other years, or not?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we do have a political piece to what we do, political advocacy. And that's actually one of our pillars, because we know that it, is critically important, especially if you're a business owner. And I have learned from other chambers. Now, granted, those businesses tend to be 3 times larger than our businesses. So, the political implications may be more relevant in their minds. But what I have seen is that a lot of business owners in these other chambers are very engaged with their local politics, because they feel like those regulations are things that can really hurt their business or help their business, right? And they want to be in touch with the decision makers and the people that are making those decisions. So I think that for us, it's critical, because we haven't been engaged as a community, and I'm speaking in generalities. It's critical for us to make sure that our businesses know who's representing them at a local level, and those decisions that are being made at a local level are the decisions that are really going to impact their businesses. I mean, we know, up here impacts them too, but in many cases, licensing, taxes, regulations, all of those things have a big impact. And also we know that the name of the game in terms of politics in this country is fundraising in many cases, right? And so, we are always encouraging our businesses to get to know who their local elected officials are, where their business is. And, if they so like them, contribute to their campaigns. I mean, that's up to them. We don't organize that activity, though we are getting a PAC organized now, Political Action Committee, because we know that that's the way that the system moves. And if you are a business owner and you're able to get in front of somebody who represents you, then that way you're able to influence them at least and let them know, here's what I'm going through. And maybe they're going to remember you when they're signing on to legislation, right? So yes, political engagement, civic engagement is critical if you're a business owner. I think that if you're not participating in that, then you're missing out. You're missing a big piece of your business that could really help you or hurt you, in my opinion.
All right. So tell everybody how would they get in touch with you or the chamber. To those individuals, because I do have some Hispanic friends who are business owners who are probably watching because they told me they were going to. Give a kind of a for somebody who you think should be a part of your chamber, what would you say to them? The Hispanic business owner who's looking for some other way to enhance their business or something like that. What would you say to them?
I'm sorry, repeat that, but I had a text come in. Forgive me, I'm sorry. I distracted me.
No worries. No worries. I know it's business hours. Trust me, I understand. No, I was saying I have Hispanic friends who own business who said they probably were going to tune in today to kind of hear because they never knew that there was a Hispanic chamber. So to those individuals, what would you say to them as it pertains to enhancing their business or working with you guys? What would you say to them?
Yeah, so for sure, what I would say to them is, join us for any of our, now webinars or seminars. There's no charge, and we are covering a vast array of topics, everything from health, to how to strengthen your business in terms of marketing or finances or sales. And you're about to see a whole string of programs on Zoom, because for now we believe that's the best way to do it on how to grow your business. So what I would say to them is that give us a shot. We're not going to ask you to become a member right off the bat. We're not going to charge you, but we believe that we can help you, give you the tools and the resources that you need to grow your business, to get connected, to get plugged in. Whatever it is that you're looking for, whether it's scalability or political connectness or networking with corporations, wherever you are in the life of your business, we believe that we can help you accomplish what you're looking for. And that we're taking a very systematic approach to that in terms of trying to segment our business owners and figure out where they are on the scale. And a lot of that is based on revenue. And then we're trying to move them up to that scale because we know that we have a lot of businesses that are micro business owners that, are starting businesses left and right. We want to get them to that point of becoming a more established business and get them up to $1 million. Only 3% of our businesses nationwide, Hispanic businesses, are at $1 million in revenue a year. And so that's the number that we're really looking at, right? If we can get our business owners to $1 million, then, they're at the top. And then there's all kinds of programs that we can help them with to help them scale that business, to get them to 10 million and 50 million. So that's our goal right now. So we believe we can help all of them get to where they need to go.
Awesome.
All right. How would they get in touch with you guys, or how would they get in touch with the chamber?
Yeah, thank you for that. So there's two ways. It's 404-929-9998, 404-929-9998, or go to our website, which is GHCC, like Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.org. And there they can find our email addresses and send me an email if you want, or I'm happy to speak with you. But, that's the best way. We're not in the office yet, but we are operating Monday through Friday, 9 to 5.
Okay. Any final thoughts that you want to leave with the watchers or listeners before we wrap up?
Yes. Thank you for giving me that. It's been an honor to be here with you. And I do want you to know, I know you keep hearing this, but we're all in this together. We have different degrees of suffering. We know that. And I think, I feel very blessed. I hope my staff feels very blessed that we have jobs and, we still have food and we're able to pay our rents and our mortgages. And we know there are many people in our community that aren't that blessed. And so, having a focus on trying to help them, I think has helped us as an organization, grow. But I just want you to know that you're not in this alone, that, there are a lot of leaders and a lot of organizations that are trying to help, whether you're a business owner or an individual, get through this crisis. And that I do believe we're going to come out of this much stronger than we went into it. I really believe that firmly.
All right, Simone, any final thoughts?
No, that was perfect. I was going to say great final thoughts. I think the exact same. And just hope everyone stays safe as we reopen.
Agreed.
All right, so we want to say a special thank you to our guest on today, Mr. Santiago Marquez. We appreciate you explaining more about the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. So to all my friends who are in that particular community, you don't have any excuse. I've given you what you need. You have no more excuses to not scale your business and find other avenues. On tomorrow, we will have Mr. Bob Rogers, who is the president and CEO of Street Grace, which deals with sex trafficking. He's no stranger to the show, but he'll be coming in on tomorrow. So again, thank you to Mr. Santiago, and we will see you guys on tomorrow at 2 p.m., not 12, 2 p.m. on tomorrow. So until then, everybody stay safe. And again, thank you to Mr. Santiago, and you guys enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
You're welcome. Appreciate you, sir.